Today on the podcast, I'd like to look at negotiation sales techniques. But before we continue, the usual apologies. I'm not in my recording booth. And then, even though the Olympics are over, one of my sons has taken a liking to Formula One racing. So that's some of the noise that you guys are going to hear in the background. And then also, I'm much better now with the sore throat. Let's see what else. So anyway, today's episode should be cleaner. We shouldn't have as many sniffles. So with that out of the way, let's head straight to negotiation techniques for sales. Listener shout outs. Shout out to Kika Michael. He reached out to me on WhatsApp, discovered the podcast on Spotify, listened to a couple of episodes. He has a shoe brand. I didn't get the Instagram handle. I also didn't get the city that he's from. Niger boy, most definitely. Then let's see what else. Oh yeah, then he said that he came across the episode in good timing because he had been considering lowering his prices, and then he came across the podcast episode where I spoke about how you shouldn't lower your prices, but just make sure that first off you're dealing with your ICP, that's your ideal customer profile. Make sure you're dealing with your people basically. Whether you call it your ideal customer profile, your target market, your whatever, just make sure that you're doing that first before you start tweaking the price. Because too many people tweak the price and the thing just F's with your mental and it doesn't help your game at all. And imagine the kind of spiral when you start off whatever it is you're trying to sell and you say that your price is X, and then you think that, okay, the price is too much. You now make it X minus 10. And then you're now getting BS from people and you now make it X minus 12. And then you keep minus and then minus. It totally screws with you. And starting off in the wedding photography game, I've seen how the thing can really mess people out of the industry. So tweak price, yeah, sure. At some point, you might have to tweak your price. The price might be a significant part of the equation. But trust me, for most of you, before you tweak the price, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you need to learn how to tweak first. Are you talking to the ideal customers? Are you talking to the right people? You need to sort that out first. After you sort out this thing of you're talking to the right people, you even need to figure out, do I have a sales process? Do I know how to sell? Is there a couple of things that I need to learn about handling sales conversations or about negotiating? In fact, that's what we're doing today, negotiating techniques for salespeople. So there's a whole bunch of other things you need to learn before you cut your price. And I'm happy that that Kika Michael was able to come across my material in good time and not drop his price. But not only that, he raised his price. And I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad when I come across stories like that. So he raised his prices. And for all intents and purposes, he's not suffering. He's not drinking Gary. So that's the way forward, especially since in Nigeria, we're in this, I don't know what kind of inflation this is, but you guys, you know how it is. For those of us who are still in Nigeria, who haven't jackpot, you go and buy something today and then 2 weeks later the price is up. And then 3 weeks later the price is up. And then, so this whole thing that prices are just going up and up and up and up like that. So you can't say you're going to keep your price constant or cut your price and then realistically think that, that whatever your hustle is, whether you're selling shoes, or whether you're selling carpentry services, or even if you're Merua, you can't think that you keep your prices stagnant and things will be well with you. Not to talk of cutting the price. So anyway, bottom line, Kika Michael, thank you very much for listening to the pod. And if you found anything of value, as you undoubtedly have, like you mentioned in our chat, please share the podcast with other people so that you can come across some nuggets here that can help them with building their businesses. So who knows? If you share something here with someone, you might be that catalyst that helps turn somebody's business around, or at least prevent them from making some really, really, really bad jam-bite mistakes, like cutting your price every time you think that sales are not doing too good. So with the listener shout out of the way, let's just head straight to negotiation techniques for sales. So negotiation, again, plenty of definitions. So I'm going to use a very simple everyday definition over here, something that every single man or woman listening to the show right now, or boys and girls, can remember, pull it out of your pocket and apply. So negotiation basically is just trying to get your own desired outcome in a business conversation or in a business relationship. That's the old school definition, pretty much. I'm yarning with you right now. You and I we're trying to get the business up and running, or we're trying to, we're trying to do something. And me, I'm looking out for my own outcome. So old school definition, that's negotiation. But new school people, however, the way that new school people look at it is, it's not just your own share that you're going to take. Because old school people are cutthroat, as in, I'll take my own share. If your blood is on the floor, like, I don't care. So long as I get my own, I'm good. Now it's an old school, real cutthroat kind of thing, especially in Western climes. So North America, Western Europe, that's that old school cutthroat kind of thing. Like, I collected my own. If you didn't collect your own, that sucks for you. So new school ideas are more about keeping an eye on mutually desirable outcomes. Like, me, I'll collect my own share, but I'll still leave something for you. So I chop, yourself, you go chop, that kind of thing. Because if people feel like they're taken advantage of, then there's less room in the future for future relationships. And in fact, there are some negotiations professionals who are going to talk about these sorts of things, to say you need to look at whether a future relationship is desirable or not. And if a future relationship is not desirable, if this is a one-off, then what the heck, just enter and just take your own, and make sure you're good yourself, and then just leave. But new school people are not that cutthroat. So whichever school you want to fall into, I'll leave that up to you. But of course, since you know that my own focus over here is to try and see how we can get repeat business and referrals and stuff like that, obviously, old school ideas about taking your own share, take the lion's share, probably is not going to work with the stuff that I talk over here about on the podcast. But then, caveat, warning, my specialty is sales. My specialty is not negotiation. So you should be listening to negotiations podcasts, reading negotiations books, things like that. And there are a bunch of free resources that I'm going to talk about I hope I remember to talk about at the end of the podcast. So, okay, now one thing I need to tackle for those of us who are sales-minded is negotiation a stage? Now, the reason why we have to tackle this is because some people think negotiation happens when you sit down at the table, then the other person is there, and, the person says, oh yeah, let's negotiate. So some of you don't realize that you're in a negotiation until you're at that level. So back to my constituency, wedding photography. There are some wedding photographers who think you're only at negotiation stage when the bride says, "Oga photographer, this 350. That 350 is harsh. You will do something now, blah blah blah." So some people think that is when the negotiation stage begins. But actually, the answer is no. That is not when the negotiation stage begins for most people who are in business. Whether you're in business as a wedding photographer or as a shoe person, or even if you're a sales professional because you're selling cars or whatever, the thing is, as a sales professional, when you're handling these conversations, you are constantly trying to prioritize stuff, move some things up, move some things down, make some things more important than they are, and then you're also deprioritizing some things, minimizing some things, making it less important, and then you're making concession on some kinds of stuff as the business relationship progresses. So even though as a wedding photographer, you didn't start haggling when you got to the part where you say my bill is 350k, and then she says 350, like how now, like I'm Kemi's friend, blah blah blah, give me a discount and all whatnot. You think you're negotiating, but the negotiation started happening earlier, at the point where you guys were talking about, is it 1 day or 2 days? And even though your own normal rate is 350k for 1 day, but she said now that the second day is just registry, is not blah blah blah, is all whatnot. So in that case, you made a concession. Ordinarily it's supposed to be 350k for 1 day, but then she said now that registry is just 1 hour now. See, registry is just here now, it's not anything. Now, okay, oh yeah, I'll add 1k, I'll add 10k or something. You can see that at that level, you guys are already making concessions. She's saying now this thing is small. Yourself, you'll be saying now this thing is big. And that's how you guys are moving priorities back and forth and making concessions. So negotiations has started then, even though you didn't haggle on price. So whether you get to the stage where somebody sits down at the table and say, all right, let's start haggling on price. The thing is, in most business relationships, whether it's cake or shoe or wedding photography or catfish or whatever, negotiations have already started from the beginning. The thing is just that you don't know, the business person, you don't know that negotiations started since. That's the reason why lots of times you lose out on these things. Because by the time you get to the price and you started haggling the price, you've already made concessions on lots of things. So back to the wedding photography example. Your normal fee is 250k one day. But you say, now, and then you agree because registry is just 1 hour the next day. So you agree. Already, you've made concessions on time. And then think about the value of time, or the value of your time rather, the number of hours that is going into the gig. You can see that you didn't haggle on price per se, but because you've made concessions on time, you actually have started diluting the price. So most times, just shine your eyes. Negotiation starts from day one. Even if at the end there's going to be another formal meeting where the bride will say, look, come to my house, daddy is the one paying, daddy wants to negotiate. Even if there's that further stage where you still meet with somebody else and negotiate, truth be told, negotiations have started from day one. So everybody listening to the pod right now, shine your eye. You've been negotiating from day one. You just don't know. Negotiation is not just about money. Negotiation is money, timelines, deliverables, man hours, or woman hours. What else? Different ways of defining the scope of the contract. Different things. It's not just money. So some of you think negotiation is money. It's not just money. So things to consider in negotiation. You need to understand the deal. You need to understand the client. You need to understand both people's angles coming into the negotiation. Whether it's you as the vendor in this case, you supply shoes, or you supply wedding photography, or you sell cakes or banana bread or whatever. You need to understand where it is you're coming from. Know your margins. You need to know what it is that the client needs as well. Then product or service knowledge is absolutely essential, because you need to be a master of your product or your service. You need to know what can go right, what can go wrong, and what we can realistically be expected to deliver. Because there's some people who say, this is not a big deal now. It's not just one, blah, blah, blah. If you're a newbie in the industry, you will think of it like, it's not that big a deal. So let's say wedding videography now, video, that would be a good example. So maybe you say, it's just 1 hour. Like, what's the big deal? But then, an experienced videographer knows that to get 1 hour's worth of footage, okay, like back to the wedding day, you will record them coming in, you record small interview, like, oh, we got married yesterday, this is registry, it's the best day of our life, blah, blah, blah. And as you're recording that, Momsy will now say, me too, let me appear in the video. That's how you now interview Momsy. Popsy will now say, so today is only the Women's Day. That's how you now interview Popsy. Then some of the uncles will say, but we have some words of wisdom for our niece. That's how they too, they will enter the video. But bottom line, what I'm trying to say is this. If you're a newbie and you don't understand, have good product or service knowledge, you won't realize that 1 hour of footage that you're going to deliver for the registry, you might actually sit down and record like 3 hours before you edit down to 1 hour. And then even that 3 hours that you record, you actually have to listen over those 3 hours and then edit it down. But what I'm just saying is that the bride says, it's just 1 hour now. Actually, that is just 1 hour now might actually equal 16 hours of your time. So you need to have good product or service knowledge so that you know what is realistic. Because some people will say, it's just this now. It's not just one extra palm, one extra slippers. You as a professional know that, okay, one extra slippers, to produce that slippers, you pay the boys, you buy the material. Now one extra slippers equals 17k in material costs. So the person saying, is it just one? You actually know that it's more than one. It's bigger than that. So understand your product and your service. Know what goes into it, what can go wrong, what is realistic. You also need to know your clients, their needs and their pain points. What's interesting for them, what's important to them, because when you know all these things, you now know truly what are the small things and what is not worth quibbling about, arguing about. Then understand, just know what it is that they're trying to achieve, not just them but you too. What are you trying to achieve? How much are you trying to capture? Your boss, your sales manager, what are they thinking? What do they want to capture on this deal? What is going to be good for the company? Different things like that. Then a word on negotiation styles. So you know how at the beginning of the pod I spoke about how there's old school styles, especially in Western climes, and then the new school way of thinking about things. So you need to anticipate people's approach because some people are cutthroat, they're aggressive. They'll come out blazing. Some people even raise their voice, slam table and all kinds of rubbish behavior. Then some people are very passive or submissive, and some people are collaborative. You need to just kind of suss them out, guess where they're coming from, try and feel them out, and it will help. Because if you head in with a collaborative mindset and you get there and the people are absolute idiots and they want to take advantage of you and everything, then that's going to be a problem. So you need to gauge this person before you guys start negotiating. But like I said, this is not my area of specialty. So you should be looking for podcasts, looking for blogs, looking for YouTube videos, looking for books, looking for more information from negotiations specialists. Then your goals and outcomes, they have to be clear. You have to know for sure when you're heading in. Now look, you know what, for this job to make sense for me, my profit margin on this thing has to be 100k. If my profit margin is 80k, it's not it's not going to work for me. You need to be clear about your desired outcomes. There's something back when I was in undergrad, they used to tell us best alternative to negotiated agreement, BATNA, BATNA. My undergraduate was in law, so was it? Okay, no, I think that was in law school that they told us that best alternative to negotiated agreement. So, and basically this whole thing is just around your walkaway point. You need to know what works for you, what doesn't. If you and your wife have sat down and you've looked at the math that look for this family to function, every single time you go out and you come back, what you're supposed to bring is 120k in profit, then you need to know that you need to be able to stick to it. Because by the time people start pricing you and the profit margin is entering 50k, I guess 50k is better than nothing. But truth be told, are you going to come back with 50k, then your wife is angry, and then she has to stay at home with the kids for the whole weekend because you're out shooting the whole wedding or doing whatever it is that you're doing, and it just leads to all kinds of whatever. Just know your walkaway point. So by the time they start pricing you and the thing has started entering 100k, you can say, oh, you know what, I'm not the vendor for you, let me refer you to somebody else. At least if you refer to somebody else and you tell the other person that, you know what, any deal you guys negotiate, I beg, just throw me like 10k, throw me 20k, now it's better. It's better than nothing. So understand, know your goals, know your expectations, understand your walkaway point, when to stand up and say, you know what, this is enough, I'm leaving. Determine your lowest acceptable deal. Then make sure that your price ranges are realistic. We need to make sure that the people also have realistic price ranges, and that's the reason why I keep saying on the podcast, we need to have qualification conversations. This is where you figure out who is this person, what are they about, and then you set all kinds of expectations around budget, and you set these expectations early. If you say in the beginning that, oh bro, from what we've been talking about so far, all these things can cost anything between 4.5M and 3.2M on the lower end, is that the kind of thing you're willing to invest in right now? You keep quiet. You hear what he says. If the person says 3.2, Bawo, for who? You now know that this deal is not for you. And then you leave. Because 3.2 is your lowest. And the person is saying 3.2. How? So you just leave it. But if you say something like that and the person says, 4.5, well, 3. It sounds just about right. But I'm preferring that 3.2, Sha. You now know that, okay, there's something here. There's room. Some of you might be scared of talking like this. But really, the first time I tried it, this is how it went. We finished talking to the babe. It was at Abuja Wedding Expo. Yeah, it was Abuja Wedding Expo. She seemed clean, masters, everything, blah blah blah. How much? I said it could be between this and between that. I gave the high end, I gave the low end, and she said, "Okay, sounds about right. When can you come and see my mother-in-law?" I was shocked. I didn't. Maybe it's beginner's luck, as by it's the first time I'm trying it. But really, that's how it works. She said, "Okay, sounds about right. Although we won't be hitting so and so, but when are you free to come and talk to mother-in-law?" And then we showed up. We spoke to mother-in-law. But man, mother-in-law was gangster. That woman negotiated, died. Like I was frustrated. I wanted to leave the place. My video guy Shagun was coming, so I sent him a text message like, "Guy, me, I'm leaving. No, this woman is talking OPT. When you come here, you continue." He told me, "No, just leave it. And then he came in, doing what Yoruba boys do. He came in, Eka Alema, this, Ngbati, language. Next thing they were laughing and everything. And she tried pulling the tactic on him as well. And, he did that whole Yoruba thing, Kini, something. And then he tried to re-anchor high. And anyway, it was a wonderful experience. And for me, it was the beginning of me understanding that everything doesn't have to be done in English. So it's an advantage if you come in, you're Omo Ibadan, the other person is Omo Ibadan too, and you guys start speaking lingo, rapport, all these things. It helps. But bottom line, what I was just trying to say is set the expectation early. It can cost between this, can cost between that. So how far? What do you think? And then keep quiet and hear what they say. You do that early, you now know what kind of negotiation that you're heading in for. You need to know, do these guys have realistic price expectations? You also need to make sure, are your own price expectations realistic? Because don't forget that when I wanted to enter into this business 15 years ago, the first bride I spoke to, I told her 400K. And she said, thank you very much. You want to build house? Thank you. And she didn't even negotiate. She was trying her best to leave the conversation. I was trying my best to keep her on the phone. And it was absolutely pathetic. And I hope none of you ever fall into that kind of situation, because you leave that whole thing feeling like a jilted lover, basically. So I hope none of you guys fall into that situation. So, I didn't have realistic price expectations because, look, wedding photography, there are already some guys that are on ground. People have established names, established brands. You can't just come from somewhere because you're coming from abroad. You now just start be quoting XYZ price. It just doesn't work that way. It's not just what you think you're entitled to. There are also market forces at play. So make sure they have realistic price expectations. Make sure you have realistic price expectations as well. Let's see what else. Okay, before you head in, make sure you have an idea of where you can make concessions. That's something I also did later on in my practice. By the time I sorted out my packages, I didn't negotiate on the actual packages themselves. I had fixed amounts for packages, and then there was a service charge. So on the service charge, I knew that if I remove 10, 20K on the service charges, that's not that much of a problem. But on the wedding packages itself, I didn't remove anything because it was pegged to cost. What I charged on the packages was a multiple of cost. I'm not going to say how much, how many X. So none of my former brides will listen and say, that thing that you charged us 450, it actually cost you 150 to produce. I'm not going to say that. But it was a multiple of cost, so I didn't touch that. I was like, look, that one is fixed. So the package, I'm not removing anything. The service charge, yes, I might go up or down. So know those things before you enter. That if you're making concessions, you can make concessions on here, or you will make concessions on there. Then also the stuff that I say about building trust and rapport, active listening, paying attention to people, trying to show empathy, concern, things like that. So all those things are really, really important. Of course, open-ended questioning techniques. Use that to gather information. What do you guys think about this? What about this? What about that? Don't go there trying to sound like a lawyer. You say, I put it to you that, don't put anything to anybody. Ask a question. How about this? What about this? If we do this, how does that affect that? What outcome are you looking for on this? So all those sorts of things. Then also get ready to handle objections, because there are some objections that everybody's going to say. One thing that everybody will say is that's too expensive. It doesn't matter what it is that you sell. If you sell light bulb, somebody will say that's too expensive. If you sell shoe, somebody will say it's too expensive. If you sell car, somebody will say that's too expensive. If you sell TomTom and you're trying to supply it at distributor price, as in TomTom, somebody will say that's too expensive. Because let's face it, in Abuja now, TomTom is 10 naira for one, and that's mad. In my own opinion, I think that's mad. Like TomTom, 10 naira. It's crazy. So of course, even for TomTom, people say that's too expensive. So now that you know, before the negotiation, people are going to say you're too expensive. You and your crew, you and your wife, before you enter that negotiation, or the other way around, wifey, if you're the business person and your husband is the one who works full time, but he's a loving, supportive spouse, have that conversation with him. How are you guys going to handle this thing? I'm going in for this deal. I know these people will say I'm too expensive. If they say I'm too expensive, what am I going to do next? You don't wait until you get into the deal before you start trying to handle objections. Try and figure out some of those objections beforehand. Then, let's see. Okay, closing the deal. Now, some people think, okay, let me put it this way. When it comes to closing the deal, the thing you see in films, that's just film trick. This whole thing of somebody enters the room, says a magical speech, something, 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 and then he gives one beautiful line, and then he closes the deal, and then everybody claps for him and all that. That's just film trick. In real life, there is no closing the deal in one big dramatic or decisive step. What you do is you guide conversations, small, small, small. You decide upon small things, small, small, small. You build consensus around smaller items leading up to the bigger items. And that is how you close the deal. That is how it's done, especially in complex sales. If you're selling TomTom, back to TomTom example, then, well, that one you just go in and haggle and then pay and go. But if you're selling a car, if you're selling wedding photography, or if you're trying to supply, diesel to a bank branch in your neighborhood, let's say, yeah, that's your thing. There's Zenith Bank in your place, there's Access Bank in your place, and your uncle owns a filling station. You want to supply diesel to banks for generator. So those sorts of things, you are actually trying to agree upon small things along the way before you lead up to the big close. So there's no closing the deal, bam, in one big step. It is small, then you close the deal. Now, an example about that, also back to my legal background. Well, this is one of the benefits of a multidisciplinary background when you come into business. For those of us who are coming into business from different angles, it doesn't matter whether you studied law or you studied accounting or whether you studied theater arts. Whatever it is that you learned in your undergrad days is going to be very valuable in business. So just, shine your eye, keep your eye open, and learn to apply the things accordingly. So this is one of the stuff that came through my legal background days, back through undergrad and stuff like that. So, okay, I'm not sure how it is in America, Australia, or all these parts, but in Nigeria, what you do is you do your undergrad, then is it before NYSC or after NYSC? There's a part before or after NYSC where you do, I can't remember what it's called, some form of tutelage where you go to a law firm and you do some work for a while. So while I was there, some of you have listened to the show, you already know that experience of mine, because that was the first time I saw a check for, I think it was 7.5M or something. That was my first time seeing like good money, big money. That was a long time ago. Now 7.5M is no money, because what can you do with 7.5? So, where was I? So we went in there, and my Oga at the time, he was providing legal support. There was an Italian company, there was a Nigerian company, I can't remember if NNPC was there. Then this guy with Jerry curls, Bismarck Ruwani, from financial something. He's considered to be like a financial guru in Nigeria. Although the first time I saw him, I was wondering, like, what's this Papilo doing with Jerry coils? Because the only person I knew who had Jerry curls was Momsi back in the 80s. So it was me. For me, it was strange seeing this guy. Like, we're no longer in the 80s. You're an old man. Clearly, you're older than my father, and you have Jerry curls. Well, of course, I still have respect for Mr. Bismarck Ruwani. So for those of you listening to the podcast, I'm not taking shots at our uncle. I'm just saying that I thought it was weird at the time. But I even saw him on Channels TV during the nationwide protests. That was like last week, and he still had the Jerry curls. So I guess that's his thing. So I noticed that what my Oga did was he got them to negotiate heads of agreement first, before we'll start negotiating all the big things later on. Now, what heads of agreement means is just that you negotiate all the small details first, all the non-binding things first. Basically, you just negotiate a small document that says these are the main terms between A and B, and these are the essential things that we're going to argue about or agree on, and stuff like that. So it makes the whole thing very helpful. So we went in there and we outlined heads of agreement. So there was talk about price of valuation, there was talk about payment terms, there was talk about, in fact, this price and valuation thing, that was where Bismarck Rwanda came in real handy, and I was really impressed, because if you're negotiating this thing, the price of crude and the price of this and price of that, you know how it is now. A war breaks out in Kuwait or whatever, and then the price of this goes up, the price of that goes up. So just agreeing on simple stuff like, how do you value this, how do you value that? I remember people then were talking about I can't remember the valuation terms that they were talking about, and were quarreling about it. And then Bismarck ran and was like, no, yeah, instead of LIBOR and NIBOR. I think LIBOR is London Interbank Opening Rate. Anyway, let me not tell you guys wrong information, but those of you who know finance, you know that there's LIBOR and there's NIBOR. So they were shouting back and forth, LIBOR, NIBOR, LIBOR, NIBOR. And then Bismarck was like, no, because of this, neither applies. How about doing this? And everybody was calm. Now you see how if you go and you negotiate heads of agreement and you agree that this is how we're going to value something, you can see now that everything is calm and cool. So that when you now get to the stage where you're negotiating the big thing, at least we have settled this whole thing of how we're going to value everything in the first place. Then what else? Timelines, milestones. One thing we discussed then was governing law. Like if there's base and everything goes to blazes, where are we going to settle this thing? Is it Nigerian law? Is it this law? Is it that? Is it arbitration? Is it, quarrel, all those things? Now you see, this is called heads of agreement in law. You negotiate all these small foundational issues first, so that when all these things are calm, we can now go and start tackling the big thing. And really, that's how deals are closed. Settle the small things first, because the small stuff turns out to be foundational, and then it gives you room to start arguing and shouting when the main thing comes up. So, 31 minutes. A lot more can be said on negotiation, whether it's before negotiation or after negotiation. How do you follow up? How do you document the agreement? How do you outline the terms and conditions? How are you going to focus on building the relationship? It's plenty. So you should be looking for people who this is their daily bread. Negotiation is not my daily bread. I'm just telling you a bunch of stuff over here, but go and look for people who they wake up and they think negotiations. They dream negotiations. All they do is negotiations. So look for a specialist in that field. There's one podcast that I used to listen to, Negotiations Ninja podcast. I'm not sure if that's still running, but listen to it because that was very, very practical. Because the guy also comes from a sales background. So, he was talking about negotiations from basically how people like you and I will handle the whole thing. So it was not too high tech like that. It's not about negotiating oil rights or huge construction projects or something like that. So that's a good podcast to listen to. So look for Negotiations Ninja podcast. Oyibo guy, American. Let's see. Then Harvard University. I've noticed that Harvard has been putting out some free online resources on negotiations, not just negotiations, other stuff. But I'm surprised that they have stuff from the negotiations program, because they used to have, I don't know about now, but back when I was in school, they used to have real world famous negotiations. Not faculty. Should I say faculty? Okay, let me just say negotiations faculty. So, professors, writers, things like that around the whole topic of negotiations. And the first seminar that I attended on negotiations and alternative dispute resolution actually was a Nigerian graduate from Harvard, and, that was his whole thing. So negotiation specialists, actually, they exist, and they're here already in Nigeria, and they've been here for at least 2 decades. So if you look, you will find them. Then, bottom line, all these factors we've talked about, consider all these things. You consider all these things, then you increase your chances of getting a successful outcome when you actually are negotiating with people. Also, just remember that negotiations start earlier than you think. But please, don't just take everything I've said here as the Bible. Pay attention. Go and look for negotiation specialists, learn from them, especially to see how it applies to you people. Because we're all coming from different backgrounds listening to these things. So Kika Michaels, he's into shoes. I started off wedding photography. Now I'm in consulting and media production. Some of you, Julia. So is it Julia? Yeah, Julia is into moi. Who else? I can't remember what Zainab is into. Like all of us, we're all into different stuff. So listen to the negotiations pros, and then you see how that wisdom applies to you in your business. So I'm going to wrap it up here since this is 34 minutes. So that's all for today. So connect with me on WhatsApp for questions, quick tips, and insights. The phone number is 080-6466-2140. And the country code for Nigeria is +234. Also connect with me on LinkedIn. It's the best social network for business, career development, and networking. So y'all should be taking it seriously. The name to search for is Tavishima Ayede. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I'll catch you guys at the next episode.